So how many of us have more than one portable drill? Oh, almost everybody. So how many of us, if we're building something like with screws and all, we use more than one drill. Maybe we've got a drill and then we've got a countersink, or we've got a screwdriver. So this is something I did, I don't know, a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. It's very handy. So what it is a place to put the drills. So it stores them, and actually here's, it's also got small holes so you can do this. I got one more here. Two things. It stores them. It also rolls over to your project so that you can just do it, put it back, keep it off your table, and so forth. So this came out to be much more handy than I thought when I built it. So let me take the drills off and then explain a little bit about the construction.
Are you using it for a charging station too?
No, I have I don't know my charging, well, I have another charging station. Ryobi makes a big, long charging station that'll do 6 batteries, and I have one of those on the wall. Anyway, so this is built out of PVC, and it has a 3/8 inch rod, threaded rod through it. So under each shelf there's a plywood disc, which obviously is the same as the inner pipe. Can we do that? I need to turn, so this way, I guess. Yeah, that's good. So there's a plywood disc under here that keeps the pipe centered. And then basically you just make however many discs you need and just use the rod. I made it this height because this is convenient for me. If it were up here, it would be hard. Down here, it's too short. So it was designed to be portable drill stand and also drill storage. And that's it.
Cool.
Yes, sir.
Then probably the shelf you probably get used for putting maybe extra bits and maybe screws.
Oh, right. Under here, yeah, I have a couple of bit holders that normally go on this shelf. I took everything off to bring it in, but it turns out that it's pretty handy.
I was thinking that would also be good for holding gouges for.
I have another one of these for gouges, and actually I have another version that has a much bigger 4-inch pipe for my grinder stand. This works really well. You can put one of these together in no time. All the time is cutting out the discs.
Is it tipsy when you get all your drills on top?
No. I'll just put a couple.
If they're all on there, it should be.
Yeah, I keep them. It's really not tipsy at all. Now, there's no reason to think that you can't make these a different diameter. The bottom could be a larger diameter. This worked out to be where I calculated this so that this would still be on, but this was small enough where I could get more yield out of my plywood sheet as opposed to making them much bigger. Any questions? It's one of those.
Is the wood disc that you said goes between the things, is that inside?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, let me explain that. So under each, like under this one, there's a wood disc with a 3/8 inch hole in it that's glued to the bottom, centered, so that this pipe cannot move.
Glued to the
locks.
underside of the
Correct. And so there's one under each one. And actually, with this design, if I decide I need another shelf, I just take it apart, cut another disc, cut out because it's not glued in any way. Any other questions?
That's a good use for wire spools if you happen to have some wire.
If you happen to have some wire, I did not. So this is Lowe's pre-finished 1/2 inch plywood. All right, that's it for me.
As you know, we've been
freehanding canes through a router, and the router we were using had a fence in it, just a slot opening and a vacuum on the back, and that wasn't catching very much router dust. So I found this online somewhere, and all it is a plate that sits on top of the router table. It's got a 2.5-inch hole in it and a V shape, and when the router is spinning wood this way, this catches it. It's picked up on the vacuum and does a much cleaner job of picking up the trashy router.
Actually, it was on X.
Turn it over.
So
It's 2x4s?
these were 2x6s we glued together, then put a 1/2-inch piece of plywood on the top and bottom, cut this V out, and then put the piece on the top. And the handle makes it easier to move around. And of course, this is available through Peachtree for.
You use that where you don't have a fence?
Yes, we took the fence off because we're freehanding canes, and the canes were longer, and we're using a pattern on them with a pattern bit. Yeah, we're clamping it on the back.
It worked well.
It also weighs enough that you could probably just set it there, but the vibration of the router was letting it float a little bit.
And sometimes the vibration will cause that to move. If you take, I use an old mouse pad, and I cut it up into little squares and put like one on each corner.
I've got one in my shop too, and they make a rubber mat that goes in the bottom of drawers that I've glued to the bottom of it. You've also been known as a sanding mat that keeps it from moving, but.
So a multi-part thing here. I get all the parts here. This is actually obviously a birdhouse, but what it is that, as most of you know, I have 2 special needs adult children, and one of the special needs programs that they go through teaches them all kinds of things. They have a full commercial kitchen, and they teach them cooking skills, and which also has all those interactions of, working together and all that. And so they were looking at different projects, and they had some that, since I spent 20 years teaching at a technical school, there's something about putting some of that together. So we wanted to, what I wanted to do was give them some skill building opportunities. Now, there are more of an advanced function special needs. There's nobody, that's, most of them can speak some well, but they all function about at the same level as Bobby and Tammy or higher. And so what I want to do is actually have them build or assemble rather birdhouses. And so I talked to the folks, and they worked with the Boy Scouts and all that are going to install them. So we're going to put them out on the trail. But they said, well, it'd be nice to have birdhouses and bat houses and butterfly houses. So we've got 3 patterns that we need to work with. The thing is that they needed, they started out saying they wanted 30 of each, and one for each one. I said, well, on the assembly they need to work at 2 together, in teams. So that cut it down to half that production volume, which I appreciated, because they said, oh, well, you think you could have them by the end of February, 1st of March? And I said, oh, sure. So I need to figure out a way to do it a little bit faster, because y'all know when you cut these, to try to mark them and then line up the line and cut it and everything. So I needed to make a production jig, which is what I did. This is the end product here, just a fairly simple birdhouse. Now the thing is I was working on making it where they can assemble them. Okay, so to make it real quick, I just made out this simple little jig here, and then so I cut the top here. Let me get these stick up here. So this one cuts the top, but I cut it to lengthwise, so I'm not moving the saw blade. So I cut everything straight, and also even though this is at a 45, by cutting it straight, I have less waste if you come off the side there. So this does the top one, and then we do this gets the front and the inside back. Now, the thing with the inside back is the reason it has that is it goes on the back like this, okay? Because they're assembling it, and as you can imagine, when you're assembling, and like I said, they're learning and they're special needs. So you got these two pieces you're trying to put the roof on. Well, they can't hold it back here, you know. I mean, it's even difficult for those of us who have some skills. So I came up with this little thing here. So they fasten that first. Now when they set the roof on, it's held for them and makes it. So it's thinking about a lot of things about how to develop a project that special needs can actually assemble and learn skills, because they're learning about screwdrivers. We have fixed screwdrivers, we have ratchet screwdrivers, so they get to work with different ones. So for us it seems like it's no big deal, but for them it's learning some skills they don't have any knowledge about. So anyway, that's what all of these pieces are for, is to cut each one of these pieces. Okay, so now these were all for links, this and the sides and the bottoms, and then the top, one piece has to be shorter than the other, you know, because it's going to overlap in this fashion like this for the roof. So we have one this is the long side rip, so it goes in, and then I rip that little piece off of the long side, so then that makes the roof rack. Then we need to go to the 45. So this is the 45 for the front and inside back, because these angles, you know, have to match up, so when they put the roof on, it'll work. Okay. Now, and then this is the 45 degree on the long back. Okay. And then this is the 45 for the corners on the bottom. You know, like this, because you know you need to let water drain out of it and also ventilation. So that's the four corners on that at 45. Then you'll notice that this back is, you know, shorter than that, so I had to, you know, cut those off. So after it's already got the angles cut at the top and everything, then this piece goes in. This is the rip for the inside back, and I'm just ripping off the width of the boards that go in there. So it was a lot of engineering fun to try to figure out all of that. Then the other jig, and my daughter Tammy and Bobby have both. Yes, they know who you are. There's this hole here, and then this hole here, which is an inlet. Here's this one at the top here. So I built a simple jig that allows, like I've got pictures of Tammy where we put, you know, well, that's not the where's the front. So this one goes in here, and then, you know, once it's set, you know, on the drill press, then she just pulls it down. So she drilled most of the holes for the front, and then we got two little spacers here.
Check the picture,
You know, they can see it later. And then that spacers allows us on the same one, without moving this, to cut this hole here. Okay. And that's also, they can assemble this. Well, what I found is that trying to find a screw that when you know, even with pre-drill on this side, when you go into the other board, it still splits it, you know. So I'm still trying to figure out a way to easily pilot hole here, because, you know, you want them to be successful. And the other thing I learned was I had to build a little spacer so that when they do the sides to the bottom, that, you know, you got one side and you got the bottom. Well, then, so we had to get a little spacer over here to hold this side up so they can run the screws in there. So it's just all that thinking about, you know, where they're coming from and how you're trying to make it where they're successful in trying to figure everything out for them, but not do everything for them, because it is supposed to be a learning process for them. So this is their first step in for most of them. I mean, Bobby and Tammy have worked for years with me, and I've taught them a whole lot of different things, and they've worked a lot of tools and everything now, but most of them aren't at that level. They're just learning. So we're going to start with hand tools, screws, and all that, and then we'll see about moving to hammers and nails.
So that jig is for cutting. Maybe I missed it. Is that like a table saw jig or that you used, or?
This is my miter saw.
So you're using it on the miter saw?
Yeah, compound miter saw.
And you're just switching blocks in and out to get your
Yes,
dimensions? Okay.
yes. So it's production, so I can get a lot of them done real quick. You know, so I can cut about 15 of them in about an hour and a half. And, you know, so of course I found I was going real good, and on the bottoms, usually I'm paying attention to grain and all that, and when I was cutting the bottoms, after I had cut all 15 of them and cut the corners on all 15 of them, I realized that there was a pith running right through the center of every single one of them, and they hadn't sat there for a half hour, and they were already doing like this and splitting, so I had to recut all of the bottoms out of a nice straight one. And this is all Home Depot cedar fence stock, cheap pickets. You know, you start going to cedar and buy, you know, dimension cedar, and you know, just because it's called dimension, the price goes up. You know, and whereas these, they got a little dog ear on the top, and you know, the price drops significantly. Finding nice clean grain is a little difficult, you know, without knots. But you know, yes, sir.
I don't want to say you need to be commended for what you do and the patience you have to do what you do.
I love it. You know.
Well, for the need that you're doing it for.
Well, I chose to be their dad 40 years ago when I married their mom. Thank you.
I'm Alex, and most of my jigs are for my table saw. So I have a series of sleds, all kinds of sliding things for the table saw. But there's a couple of jigs that I actually have to use for setting up other tools. For instance, my drill press and also my router. But this one is for my my drill press. So what normally I have to do if I'm making boxes, the doors and using the European hinges, I usually have to figure out where to actually put the holes for the hinges on the cabinet, the door cabinet. So they usually have measurements for it, and it depends on the type of hinges away from the fence that I put up for my drill press. So I usually have to mark it and then actually put a hole. So I use scrap pieces of wood, and then actually drill it, and then put my fence up against my wood block.
Good job.
Yeah. And then after that, make sure that the hinge sits in the right distance, proper distance for the material. So that's a pretty simple setup. So this one's probably this one's for that one, I think, and then this one would be for this setup for this hinge. As soon as you get it once, I mean, there's all like a bunch of scraps and stuff like that. So you do it once, and you keep that scrap that you used to make that hole, and then after that, I use that to set my fence each time. So I could actually move it out, drill something else, and then stick the fence back in there with that little jig, and then reset the fence a lot quicker. Okay, now, for making boxes, sometimes with these mitered edges, the 45-degree edges, there's not that much strength when you do these 45 degrees in here. So to add some stability and strength, and sometimes decorative effects, some aesthetic effects, you can put some spline pieces in there. So this is just a Purple Heart that I've sliced and put it inside the corner. And add a couple of them, and it adds strength to the box itself, to rigidity. And in order to do that, you need to get the proper jig to hold that box and then slide it into the table fence and cut that slot. So the box would, I figure out where I put it. So this thing has the markings, the lineup markings in here. And then I would place my box where I want where I want to cut it. And I would use these adjustable sliding, these sliding things, and then just lock it in place. And use that and just slide it on the table saw and get a nice cut. And after that, just remove the box out and do all corners, all 4 corners. There. Right in there, just make a pass, and you have all the corners cut. And after that, come back and then do your splines, and then after that, just slice it off and then do some sanding. And this is pretty simple to make, somewhat. It's just the base, and also I have my runners for the base that'll sit inside the table fence groove, and then I have these pieces, which are 45-degree angle pieces, which will hold this holder part in here, and I have one groove in here that holds the track material for the clamping block.
In the last couple of weeks, my wife picked up an end table that she wanted to rework for a lady, and trying to get the top to refinish. We couldn't get it to stain. We couldn't, no matter what we did, we sanded it, it still wouldn't take no stain from anybody. So we did an inlay on an 1/8" maple top to it, and trying to find something that I could reach out in the middle of the tabletop with. That I had several clamps, but nothing I had was going to work. So I started out trying to use a gallon jug of water to separate the top and hold the middle of it down. In the meantime, I saw in magazine this clamp, and they brought out that all you needed was a 4-inch clamp. I drilled a couple holes in it. I thought that would be the most difficult part of the whole thing, was to drill a hole through it. But I don't know what kind of metal that is. That drill bit went through it in a hurry. I really was surprised.
Cast iron.
And I just roughly cut out the holes the width of the back piece here. Actually, I got them a little bit too wide. The next one I'll build, it'll be narrow. Then it said use, take a 1-inch dial, split it in half, use that for pressure points out here on the front, and you loosen it up. This one, probably with next one, we'll probably lay that top screw down a little bit farther to give a little bit wider jaw on it. But I just thought it was interesting, and decided to bring it in this morning to share. It came out of Wood magazine. One of them days just sitting in the cold mornings looking through books to have something to do. So that's my share.
So I was in the process, and I'm about that close to being done, so I can get started on another process of making a 6-piece bedroom set for the wife. She didn't like no 2 pieces alike in the bedroom, and so made a king-size bed and a couple of dressers and a couple of nightstands and a lingerie something or other that'll probably be used for socks. You don't know her that well, but not a big lingerie woman. But that's another story. In this, it was put together, the joinery, a lot of it, with loose tenon joinery. And this came out of Wood magazine, if you're interested, issue 128, page 50. I try to brand these so that when I wonder what this is and where it came from and how to use it, I can go back because I lose it quickly.
You would forget.
Oh no. There's a couple of tricks to using this thing, not really tricks, but if you have a leg and a stile, the first thing you want to do is clamp them together, not like they're going to go together, but side by side, and make your registry marks so that you want a tenon here, or a mortise here to put the tenon in, to match the other one. And it's not too much if you only have one, but if you have 2, they've really got to match really closely. And the legs had about 6 in them, and there was about 200 and some mortises that I had to make for these loose tenons. So the neat part of this thing is, and the other trick is, at least in the directions, they say, make your tenons Wrong. Leave the tenons until last. They're easy to adjust. Make this thing first. Make your slot, and who cares how big it is? It can be approximate within reason. You stick your bushing in here, and you stick your router bit in here, and you stick it on a scrap piece of wood. It's self-centering, so however thick that piece of scrap wood is, you're going to be nailed to the center of it when you put your clamps on it. And you make your first mortise. All your mortises are going to be identical, so measure that mortise. And then go over and make your tenons, because it's a lot easier to plane that tenon down in 6-foot long sheets. I don't have a 6-foot long sheet, but this little piece of cherry scrap used to be 6 feet long, and so you just plane it or put it in a thickness sander and get it down to whatever thickness that mortise winds up being. If you make this first and try to adjust this to the right width, it'll drive you crazy. Or at least I'm not smart enough to figure out all the bushings and the combinations of wiggle room to do it. So then you come over here to your style, and you make this mark right here very carefully, right in the center. And you line that up. We'll say it's lined up. I'm not going to bother to put the clamps on it. You line that up, and you know this mark is lined up with this mark, and you put 6 of them on a leg in a style, and you slap them together, and it goes together like it's supposed to. Yeah, I'm not sure what Wood Magazine says to make these out of. Actually they said you can use anything. I had another couple of pieces of scrap cherry laying around. I had a piece of ugly scrap 1/2 inch, and they recommended 1/2 inch acrylic, I guess, so you can see what you're doing, but acrylic's expensive and this was free. And I happen to have these pieces of aluminum sitting there in the shop too, with not much else to do with them. And so I used those and a couple of screws in here, and it self-centers. And just in case I'm not perfect, and perfection doesn't very often happen in my wood shop, when you put it on the leg, and I'll do it this way like it says, if this is up on the leg, I make sure that the legs, that this jig is pointing up on the legs, and when I turn around to the stiles, I make sure that if this is up, that my stiles is pointing up, because if it's off just a little bit, you're in big trouble. But if you alternate this thing, you're dead on all the time. You can put them in at 45-degree angle if you want to, as long as the other one's a mirror image of that. This works really well. Once you get this jig made, you can just loose tenon and mortise up a storm. Now the plunge router, on the short ones, the ones for the bed were about at least twice this long, but on the dressers, they're fairly short. You make that it's made out of oak in a couple of passes. When it was more with the plunge router, I used 3 passes, but it didn't take long. There's little stops on the router, so it was really quick. Yes?
How about when you do ends, where you're taking a piece and now the mortise needs to be in the small end? Does that work for that as well?
It does, with a little creative, another small little jig that I didn't bring. When you're clear out here on the end, the thing wants to fall off this piece of aluminum, and so it wants to be crooked. And I took a little strip of 1/4 inch, as it happened to be hardboard, and slid it down through here so that it would catch that and not fall off of there.
And I appreciate that, but I was thinking about when you're having to put a mortise into the end. Yes, there you go. How do you do that?
Go back to Wood Magazine Index.
Because a lot of the stuff I built with loose tenons are almost always, a style and then a rail.
I don't know. I hadn't, like an eighth on a table or something? Yeah. All right.
I do like his idea of putting the Wood Magazine and the issue and all that stuff on there. That's a great idea. I saw this on the wall when I was looking for jigs. And I'm going, what did I make that for? And I had to study it to figure it out. All this is when I was doing something on a drill press, and I had something I was making like 30 or 40 of, and I needed to drill in a certain area. All it is making an angle on here so I could fit it right to the corner, hold it there, and drill my drill. And I've used this over and over again because you clamp it down to wherever you want. So if you had a bigger block, you just move it over one way or another. So anyway, it was a simple part that I make sure it was squared up every time I went to use something for drilling. So that was about it. That was an easy one. Now I know what it is. I looked at it for like a week. I'm thinking, what did I do with that? Anyway, now this I've shown before for using on a bandsaw. When I go to cut off a pin blank, I was putting my fingers and just doing it by hand. I was getting over there and pushing it through the blade. So later on, I ended up putting this on. I put the fence right across here. I just have to move it to where I wanted it, and they got your bandsaw blade. So all I did was put your block on and just pull it across, and that way you can cut it to whatever you wanted. It was simple. Rather than making a part that goes into your groove on the bottom, you know, the track, all I have to do is put this against the fence, and you can use it for anything you want to cut. So that was just simple. And I made them for different type of pins. This is for slimline, and I have one for different models. That way I just bring that off the wall to cut up whatever pin I was doing. That was a nice, easy one.
Yeah, in full disclosure on that, this was kind of an on-the-fly jig. The YouTube audience is going to eat us alive if they see how close his fingers are to that blade. So we convinced him. I think maybe we need to come up with a tool to help that.
Well, actually, what I was doing on that was you had the fence across here, and then I would measure the length of the tube where I was going to be cutting, and I'd make it a little bit longer than that. And I had my fingers like this over the fence. And so a lot of times when I was doing it, the rollers for the bandsaw would be pushing against my hands. I know I was getting a little close when I could feel the rollers. And I did it like that for 10 years. But I had 3 people that week say, you know, that's pretty close, when they sit there and watch how I did it. It's all right, fine. And this took like 5 minutes. So I figured after 10 years, I should have thought that, you know, 9 years before that, but that didn't happen. Okay, when I was doing the process of making a couple different things, first of all, I decided for the 2x4 contest last year to make a segmented bowl. I've never did any type of segmented work, so I was making a sled, and I figured out how to make the sled from there. It was really easy to make, and they're pretty simple. It's just a matter of lining it up on the right angles. But this one was for cutting 22.5 degrees for the segments on the table saw for cutting the segments, and then all you had to do, depending on how big of a wide you wanted the bowl, you just change this one way or another to make your length, you know, to where you want it. So you just take the stop. It was really simple. It just has a couple runners that we put on the bottom. That way you could, you know, make sure you're accurate every time. But I made this one for making one of theirs, and then we got into making the Celtic Knots. Well, when the Celtic Knot pins, a Celtic Knot, for anything you're making, bottle stoppers or whatever else, you had to have a certain angle. So I did them at 45 degrees, and I made one for the table saw and one for the bandsaw. And then I wanted to try a different knot that extended it out farther to 35 degrees, so I did one for the table saw, one for the bandsaw. By the time I got done, I made 5 sleds. I had never made one before, but they're real easy to do. And if you go out to our YouTube video, making the Celtic Knots, we did show how to make the sleds and stuff in there. The biggest thing that stopped me from making anything segmented for the longest time, I had no idea how to make the sled. You know, I knew the theory of how to put them together and different things like that, but until you actually make it, it's a lot more simple than what I thought. And a lot of people that have never tried it, it's because they didn't know how to cut the angles. So anyway, that's how you do it. Next.
You'd have to talk with me later on to find out what some of this stuff is. These are, do these first. These are 2 of the push sticks I use on my table saw. This is what I use on my table saw that keeps me safe. I can run stuff through my table saw that's smaller than you think safely without any problem. This keeps the wood down and pushes me through up against the fence. This is my feather board. I got some of those things, magnetic things you bought years ago. I put it on the front of my saw, and all I do is dust them every now and then. Because if I do a lot of small stuff, so they're not practical. But this keeps the wood up against the fence, This pushes it through. And when I get to the end, I just kick it and it runs right on through. Now, a lot of times I'm ripping pieces 1/8 by 1/8 in my table saw. I can still use this. I have a lot of different push sticks. I make them out of scrap plywood. I'll make a dozen at a time or whatever, in different thicknesses and different widths. This, I can't hold that little piece up against the fence, up under here if it's only 1/8 of an inch down. But with this, I can go up under the fence to hold a piece of wood up against the fence as I slide it through. So I can rip an 1/8 by 1/8 piece of wood. I can rip a piece smaller than that. So that's what these are used on my table saw, and this keeps my hands away from the blade. And nobody will cut stuff smaller than I will on any of the saws. Well, I'll cut stuff as small as anybody else on any of my big saws. This is a jig I made. It's probably, I don't know, it's 20-something years old. And this was made for my Porter Cable palm sander, or finishing sander, however you want to describe it. This goes in my vise. But my palm sander goes in here upside down. That allows me, when I'm making bookmarks or letter openers, I sand to 120 grit. But that allows me to actually do my sanding and get a finish on that. I don't have to sand real or do a lot of sanding down 320 or whatever. I only sand 220, 320 when I'm sanding the finish. The finish. I don't do the wood that way. This is a tool. I have some longer ones. I have different sizes. This allows me, when I'm making boxes, to make all of my miters look almost perfect. And I go through a lot of stuff like that, showing you how to take imperfect miters and make everything look like it was. This has 120 grit paper on it. And I actually sand the top of my boxes with it. And people think I sand it with something higher grit. Most of the things that I make, I sand to 120 grit. Might go to 180, and that's it on the wood. And this, what I do with this, if I got a box, I usually keep it where it's resting on two sides. And I'm going in a circle of, kind of a circular motion. I will use bigger circles when I'm eating everything down to make it smooth. When I've gotten it down to where it's flush all the way around, I go to tighter circles as I'm moving it, but it's always resting on two sides at one time. And it does the same thing that the finish sander does, or the random orbital sander. It puts the scratch marks are so light and they're in different directions that the human eye doesn't pick it up. That's all it does. And this is what I do with all my boxes. I can actually sand. This is probably my baby. I use this whenever I'm on the radial arm saw, chop saw. This allows me to cut a lot of stuff in the middle of the table. I don't care what table it is, I can cut anything I want to cut without being up against the fence at any angle. And this is just my hold down stick. This is my finger extension or hand extension, so that these are never anywhere where they're going to get cut. And the one thing I preach all the time is safety. So if you're doing anything where you're close, your hand and fingers in an unsafe position, think about something you can do to get your hands away from there. Because it only takes one lack of concentration or one, and you won't know you're cut until you see the blood. You'll see blood before you feel it. All right. If I'm on a radial arm saw, if this is the thickness I'm cutting here, I have to make sure that the back end of the stick, my saw blade is here. Okay, I never cut on the saw if I'm not looking at the blade. So when I'm cutting on when I'm cutting miters, everything is cut from this side to where I'm looking at the blade. And unless I'm doing crown molding or something like that, which I don't do anymore, I don't have any reason to turn my blade that way. And the way I can cut all my miters this way is if I'm cutting out a box, I always mark the face side of the wood. Face side stays to the fence. That allows me to flip the wood to cut my angles from this side all the time, so I don't have to, I'm looking at the blade, all right? I won't go into that, but, you know, I usually make them do demonstrations at woodworking show or whatever, so, you know, anybody don't have any more questions, you can talk with me. But that's what this is, but I didn't finish saying this. Whatever I'm cutting at, the thickness I'm cutting here, the back end has to be higher. And I have sandpaper on the table, and my saw stays at 90 degrees all the time. I don't change it other than my miter saw when I'm cutting angles on boxes. But anything else, I can cut this at any angle I want to cut it by placing it there. The fence is here. And this is, when I got sandpaper on the table, my hand is here. The pressure I'm applying here, all that pressure is transferred right to the tip. And all I've done is create a device so that whatever I got out here doesn't move, and that allows me to cut in the middle of the table and it doesn't snatch it. All right, and I will cut stuff incredibly small in the middle of the table because I can control what I'm doing. Go ahead. And